Hello guys, welcome back to another live stream. Today we are continuing with our story Zuma by HavocHound. Before we continue, here's some quick warnings. These stories are rating T and M. If you know what this is some violent stuff of rated M of description of violence. If you want stay you can stay, but with one cautions. Be careful what you're hearing. In this story you are hearing some really crazy stuff on the story. If you don't want to hear, then click immediately out of the stream. And if you want to watch later and don't hear the part, just skip out. Better get out before I start the stream, because this story is rated T plus or M, and this why please be careful. And on my you can see everything on my description. Please don't let kids under 12 watch this view subscription advice. Please note this is a horror story about the kid's pop store, and this could ruin your childhood. Rated M of description of violence. And if you want more stuff, hear more updates, follow my social medias, and then we'll be about 2 minutes and 20 seconds away for the stream to begin. Until then, guys, enjoy some spaceships. Minus 15 seconds. T-minus 20 seconds. Seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Woohoo! Let's do this!
Zuma's fear. And Damien Stone, shouted Chase, making everyone jump. He was showing a rare horrified expression that the pups rarely ever saw from him, and he was slowly turning green too. Zuma and his family, they had to deal with that monster? Who is he? A bad guy? Asked Rubble. Chase shivered as his eyes closed. He's not just a bad guy, Rubble. He's one of the worst criminals I ever read about in police reports. He's been tied to dozens of murders, thefts, assaults, gang-related activities. The guy is a psychopath, and his last crime before they caught him was when he. Chase's eyes widened as he stared at Ryder, who looked at Chase with a solemn frown. The others didn't know what was going on, but they felt a deep dark pit forming in the stomachs. Rocky now knew who it was that had made Zuma have those nightmares, and if this human was as bad as Chase was saying. Why didn't tell us? Or even me? Thought Rocky, feeling that his abusive ex-owner paled in comparison to this stone person. Ryder, sir, was Zuma's family, were they the ones? Chase whimpered as his tail folded between his legs. Ryder, clutching his fist, closed his eyes and nodded. Upon seeing this, whatever strength Chase had seemed to fail him as he rushed towards a nearby garbage pail and began to hurl. The others were shocked again to see this as Sky ran over and began to pat him on the back. Between the moments of puking, they swore they could hear Chase sobbing as well. Never had they seen their leader so broken before. Rocky, Marshall, and Rubble looked at each other with worry. If this stone person could make Chase lose control, how bad was it? When he finally pulled his head out and wiped his tears, Chase shook his head. Oh Zuma, he saw all that, heck, he lived through it? What happened? Asked Marshall, gulping. Ryder took a deep breath and told them of the tragedy that forever changed Zuma. Greg had immediately ordered Zuma and Shelley to head into the kitchen. Marcia was also ordered, but she refused to part from her husband. Despite the pups wanting to stay by their owners, they obeyed and went inside. However, they peeked out of the small order window connecting the two rooms as they watched the man named Damian Stone walk over to the soda machine. He took a cup and filled it up before turning back to the married couple with a smile. Drink? We're fine, grumbled Greg, holding his wife tight. Stone shrugged as he sipped his soda before calmly walking over to them. Pretty kind of you to put the pups out of danger. Where are your kids? I can't have any, but Zuma and Shelley are like my children anyway, muttered Greg, lowering his head. Despite the danger, Zuma and Shelley looked at each other with a warm smile. They always thought of Greg and Marcia as their parents too. Ah, how sweet. I wish I had a father like you, said Stone with a wide smile. Of course all mine was good for was being a lazy ass. I think the most exercise he ever got was when I slit his throat and watched him fumble around in a futile effort to stop the bleeding. This is good orange soda, by the way. He finished his drink while ignoring the terrified and disgusted looks he was getting from the couple and their pups. Sighing in satisfaction, he tossed the cup away before he punched Greg in the face and knocked him down. Marcia, Zuma, and Shelley shouted his name, but two of Stone's gang grabbed Marcia and held their guns to her temples. Greg groaned as he got up, holding his injured jaw while Stone sat down and laid his feet on the injured man's back. Now all that drinking has gotten me hungry. I was going to order Chinese, but a good old-fashioned burger will do fine. Make me one. I don't have to make you anything, shouted Greg, throwing the feet off his back. He got up, but the sound of the gun's safeties coming off stopped him from doing anything reckless. Whatever happened to the customer is always right? Or is this place's reputation not as good as I heard it to be? Asked Stone, raising an eyebrow. If you don't make me a good burger, I will cut off a finger of your wife's hands every time you get it wrong. As he said this, he took out a switch knife and flipped it open. Burger. Medium well. Now. Greg looked at his teary-eyed wife and nodded. He slowly made his way towards the kitchen. TSK. "You gotta go faster than that, man," said Stone as he pulled out a pistol from his pocket and aimed for Greg's legs. Zuma saw this and shouted, "Greg! Look out!" A shot rang in the air, followed by a cloud of blood erupting from a screaming Greg's left leg. Shelly and Zuma screamed as they rushed out of the kitchen to their owner. Howling in pain, Greg held his bleeding leg while it formed a red puddle on the floor. Zuma nearly wet himself upon seeing so much of it get on his paws and fur while trying to help stop it. "He needs help. Call 911, shouted Zuma to the other humans who just laughed at the pup. How about I call 1-800 fuck you, answered Stone, before he aimed his pistol at Zuma, who froze up. Shelly saw this and quickly got in front of her brother like a shield. "Now either your owner gets me my burger or you get buried in a gym bag. The choice is his." Greg, despite the pain, managed to get up and turned to his pups. "Stay out of this. I can do this." The pups whimpered as he continued to make his way to the kitchen, limping on his bleeding leg. A few minutes later the kitchen grill was on, and the smell of a meat patty lingered in the air. It still wasn't enough to counter the smell of blood for the dogs, though. Zuma and Shelly, terrified of what would happen to them, held on to each other as the latter dived into her brother's chest and cried. Zuma wanted to cry too, but all he could do was stare at the bloody marks her owner made. He then glanced at Marcia, crying and ready to crumble to her knees. And Stone, the monster that did all this, he just twiddled around that knife of his without a care. It was like he had no regrets upon the fact that he had just shot somebody and was threatening others. Finally, after much waiting, Greg came out with a burger on a plate. He walked over to Stone and presented it to him. Taking it in his free hand, Stone sniffed the burger and then took a bite out of it. After a few chews, he stopped, spat it in front of Greg's face and threw the burger into a wall. "Make it again." "But I..." He raised his gun at the other leg. "Make it again." Greg whimpered and nodded, turning around as he slowly made his way back to the kitchen. Stone then got up and went over to Marcia and said, "Oh, right. I forgot. Need to take something from your wife here." The family gasped in horror as Marcia screamed while Stone took her right hand and pressed his knife against one of her fingers. Greg shouted in rage and tried to stop him, but he fell on his knees due to his wound. Shelly, unable to see anymore, rushed to help but was kicked back by one of the goons and sailed into a chair. Zuma went to his injured sister, but a scream made him turn around and scream as well. Stone wasn't just cutting one of Marcia's fingers off, he was sawing it. Up and down the knife went despite Marcia's struggles as her finger slowly began to come apart from her hand. The gleeful look on Stone's face was nothing more than a twisted sick pleasure upon seeing the sight of dismemberment. The finger soon came out, and Zuma saw wound begin to spray blood out along with bits of bone. Zuma fell to his knees and lost his lunch immediately. Now there was a stench of stomach bile and blood mixed in the air. Non-fazed by all this, Stone walked back to his chair, ignoring the crying of Marcia and the cursing of Greg. He looked at the husband and smirked. "Now unless you want your wife to become 8-fingered instead of 9, I suggest you make a good burger." Greg began to sob as he got back up to try again. 5 times. 5 times Greg tried and 5 times he failed. With Marcia always paying for it. Stone kept his promise and cut off a finger each time. Now Marcia was missing her right pinky, thumb and wedding finger while her left had her 2 middle fingers missing. All laid out on a table in bloody stumps. Marcia was barely standing anymore, only the 2 goons who had been holding her kept her from falling down completely. Zuma and Shelly's faces were covered with tear marks. This was the woman who had loved them all their lives. She had read stories to them when they went to bed at night. If they were sick or injured, she would kiss them and take care of them until they were better. Marcia had even told Zuma and Shelley one day that they were named after children she had been hoping to get with Greg until they found out about his problem. That meant more to them than anything because it showed that even though they were pups, they were thought of as family instead of pets. And now that woman, their mother, was being tortured by this maniac who didn't seem to care. Greg, in his 6th attempt, presented the next burger as all awaited with a held breath to see how Stone would take it. He chewed it for a bit, tapping his chin. With a smile he pretended thumbs up to Greg. Good stuff. You got it. Greg sighed in relief, as did the others. However, Stone threw the burger away like he did with all the others. Yeah, you actually got it right the first time. I just lied to screw with ya. He chuckled while the others stared at him with disbelief as they wondered how in God's name this man's sick mind worked. Of course, you forgot one little thing each time, scolded Stone as he raised his finger and shook it back and forth with a tisk-tisk. What? Asked Greg, trembling. You forgot the fries, answered Stone with a grin. He then pointed to 2 of his men. Grill him on this lesson, boys? Before Greg could argue, he was dragged by the 2 into the kitchen while begging for mercy. Zuma and Shelley wanted to go help him, but were too frozen by the amused glare that Stone was giving them. Their spines shivered as they heard the sound of the grill being used, followed by Greg screaming. A foul smell came from the room as Greg continued to scream along with the sizzling. It continued for a few minutes until it suddenly stopped and Greg's screams turned to whimpers. When he was dragged out, Shelley and Zuma cried out in horror at what they saw. Greg's entire right face was burned along with his hands. Tears from his only good eye began to fall as his hands twitched, causing him to give a slight shout of pain with each movement. He was thrown onto the floor like a piece of wasted meat as Stone inhaled the smell. Now that smells great. Maybe you should serve yourself one of these days? Unable to take any more, Marcia broke free from her captors and screamed. She ran at Stone with fury in her eyes, her bleeding hands flaying in the air. Stone avoided her charge, got behind her, and locked his arm around her throat. You know who hasn't eaten today? Shiva. He showed her his knife in front of her terrified eyes. I think it's only fair that she gets a meal as well, don't you? With that said, he stabbed her, much to everyone's horror, straight in the back over and over again. She screamed as every inch of the blade went into her as her back became completely covered in blood. Stone then turned her around and started stabbing her in the stomach just as fast. Marcia, shouted Greg, his voice cracked and broken. Mommy, shouted Zuma and Shelley in horror as they saw the light in her eyes slowly fade. With all her remaining strength, she weakly glanced at her family one last time. I love you. She whimpered before Stone's knife found its way into her throat with a stab. She gurgled out blood before she went limp while the knife was twisted in further. When it was dragged out of her, she fell to the floor in a crumbled heap, her blood covering every part of her body. No, screamed Shelley as she covered her eyes and fell to the floor in tears. Mommy, whispered Zuma as his eyes began to water. Mommy, get up. But no matter how much he or his sister screamed, their bleeding mother's body didn't move. Greg crawled to his wife as he took her lifeless body into his arms and cradled her. He silently cried as he wiped away the blood off her pale face and kissed her forehead. Marcia, my love, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Why? Demanded Zuma as he turned to Stone, who raised his eyebrow. Why? Why do all of this? Because it's fun, said Stone as he stretched his arms. Well, that and your owner her refused to pay. I'll pay, just, please. Whimpered Greg, sobbing. Just spare me and my pups. Please. Show mercy. Take whatever you want. Just stop hurting us, shouted Shelley, lowering her head in a bow. Stone rubbed his chin. Maybe I'll end your suffering. He turned to his gang and snapped his fingers. Starting with the widow. At once everyone who had guns aimed at Greg, who didn't even flinch. Zuma screamed in protest as Greg looked at them and whispered one last time, "I'm sorry, pups." And the bullets hailed into the sky. Shelley screamed and tried to run towards Greg as he was assaulted on all sides by the gunfire, but Zuma held her back. They watched as their father figure was torn apart along with Marcia. When it was all over, all that remained were two minced meat corpses covered in bullet holes that lay in each other's embrace. Zuma didn't bother holding on to his sister anymore as they both ran to their now dead owners. They wept over their bodies, saying their names over and over again as the blood covered their fur along with their tears. Zuma looked into their lifeless eyes and saw none of the warmth he was familiar with whenever they gazed at him or Shelley. Every happy moment he had with them, from playing on the beach, to teaching them how to work the restaurant, to every single birthday, Christmas, and Halloween they had together. It all played in his head for one single moment. And then it was all covered with every second of seeing Marcia and Greg torn apart and left for dead. Their blood and guts were now on him, pieces of their bodies scattered all over the snack shack that each of them had been proud to own on the beach. "I'll kill you," shouted Shelley, growling at Stone, who snorted. With rage in her eyes, his sister charged at their parents' murder. "I'll kill you." "Shelley." "No," shouted Zuma, knowing they were no match for him. Like lightning, Shelley jumped up to try and bite Stone, but she was met with something sharp. Something that went straight into her neck. Looking down, Shelley saw the knife that was used to kill her mother was now stuck in her throat. She looked up at Stone, who smirked as he twisted the knife before pushing her off of him. The world seemed to slow down for Zuma as he watched his sister fall to the ground and spat out blood that rained down upon her. "Shelley." He rushed to his sister, holding her as she looked at him with fear in her eyes, tears dripping down her face. Zuma. "Don't speak." "Shelley, please," cried Zuma as he held the last of his family close to him and tried to stop the bleeding. No matter how much he tried, the blood wasn't stopping and her breathing was lessening. "No. You can't die on me, Shelley. Don't leave me too. Please. I'm scared, bro." Shelley gave one last gasp before her eyes closed and she went limp in Zuma's arms. He froze as he stared at her lifeless face. Holding tight, he hugged her close to his heart and began to pat her head as he felt nothing but pain upon seeing everything he loved in his life shattered before him. "Shelley. Shelley, please, sis, please don't go too. I don't want you to. Shelley? Shelley? Shelley?" When he got no response, he gently laid her down and caressed her cheek. Zuma just sat there, his tears falling down upon her body as he looked at his sister with nothing but sorrow. Stone flipped his knife closed and said, She actually made me draw Shiva faster than I ever had. Kudos to her." Upon hearing this, something snapped in Zuma as he roared and dived at Stone, who was too surprised to do anything. Zuma bit his arm as hard as he could, tear it as best as he could while drawing blood. Flashes of his family echoed in his mind as he only wanted one thing, to kill this man. Stone swung his arm everywhere to get Zuma off until he finally did, throwing him through the window of the kitchen where he landed across a counter where bottles of ketchup, mustard and relish broke his fall. Zuma screamed as pieces of glass entered his back before he fell to the floor. Exhausted, he lay there with his eyes closed. He knew he had to move, but he didn't want to. They were going to look for him and then they would kill him. He didn't care. If it meant being with his family again, he didn't care if he was going to die. Hearing the door open, Zuma waited with halted breath for a gunshot or a knife blow or anything that would have him embrace death. There was nothing. Nothing until somebody shouted, "He's already dead." Blow must have killed him on impact. Son of a bitch. He's lucky, he heard Stone say from the other room. Let's just get out of here and get some subways. We'll use the money our deceased donors have decided to give to us in their register. Zuma opened his eyes when heard the door slam shut and looked over his body. There were two kinds of red on him. The blood from his wounds and that of his family, and the ketchup that was on him from the broken bottle he crashed into. They must have been fooled. This still didn't make Zuma even move an inch until he heard the ATVs driving away. Even after that he slowly took his time to get up and walk on shaken legs out the door. Zuma walked through the snack shack that had been a key place in his life since he could remember. Now it was ruined with broken furniture, bullet holes, and blood. So much blood. He stared at his blood-covered family and then at his paws which were also covered in blood. All he could see was blood. Blood on the floor. Blood on the walls. Blood crawling all around him. Zuma saw this all and he held his head back and screamed. And scream. And scream.
Wow. Okay, I think this part here gone too far for me and maybe for you guys as well. You know what? We're gonna Before we continue with the next part, um, let's take a little bit of time. Before before we continue with the next part, we are going to take a 2 minute break for then to continue then with our story to calm a little bit down because this part was a little too crazy and too creepy and very horror. But anyways, I see you in about 2 minutes again to continue with the next chapter. Until then, see you back in about 2 minutes. if you're already, if you guys are ready to continue, we are now continuing with the next chapter. That will be the next chapter is chapter 7, and yes, let's. Here, if you guys are ready, then let's do this. Enjoy.
And after Ryder had finished describing the scene, none of the pups had the means to speak upon learning of the horrible event their water pup friend had gone through. Rubble was hiding his eyes with his paws, whimpering and crying as if Stone was a real monster about to jump out. Chase was turning green again, but he was too busy comforting a weeping Sky who was drying her eyes on his chest. Marshall was also crying, and had the biggest frown on his face anyone had ever seen. The only one who wasn't scared or crying was Rocky, who sat there in stunned silence. His eyes were wide open and he was trembling. In his mind, all he could think about was Zuma, watching his family butchered in front of his eyes. Never in a million years would he have thought that the same energetic, cool, and fearless pup he called his best friend would have gone through an event that would have broken most people. Zuma, he's stronger than any of us ever thought. How could somebody be so evil, Ryder? Asked Marshall, who seemed to have lost a bit of that happy-go-lucky spark he always had in his eyes. Some people are just horrible, Marshall, whispered Ryder, shaking his head. I'm sorry I had to tell you all this, pups, but Stone escaped prison and I believe he's after Zuma. All the pups gasped upon hearing this. Rocky decided he had enough waiting and bolted for the door. Rocky! Wait, shouted Ryder, but the fleeing pup ignored him. Rocky was sure that there was more to the story that he needed to hear, but none of that mattered. Zuma was all alone in the hospital, and if Stone was after his best friend then he needed to be there ASAP. Rushing to his pup house, he barked twice before shouting, "Vehicle mode." His pup house transformed into his recycling truck and he hopped in. Turning the ignition on, Rocky stepped on the gas and drove down the driveway towards the bridge without stopping. Rocky was pretty sure he had broken the speed limit while trying to get to the hospital, but he figured he could chalk it up to a Paw Patrol emergency. When he arrived, he rushed through the halls without stopping to get to his best friend's room. When he entered it, he saw a man he never recognized before and growled. "Who are you?" He normally wouldn't be this threatening, but considering that this Damian Stone was loose, and that he had a gang with him, Rocky wasn't taking any chances. The man took out something from inside his trench coat and opened it, revealing it to be a badge. "I'm Detective Shaw from the Coastal City Police Department. So quit showing me those teeth and relax." Sorry, apologized Rocky as he felt his cheeks turn red from embarrassment. Remembering why he came, Rocky quickly turned to Zuma's bed and rushed over to check up on the pup. He was still sleeping soundly, like he was in a dreamless sleep. Rocky whimpered and nuzzled his cheek with a few tears dripping down his cheek. "Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you tell me? I could have helped you. Protected you. You, darn it, Zuma." "I take it you're one of his teammates from Paw Patrol?" asked the detective as he leaned on the wall, crossing his arms. "Yeah. I'm Rocky, the recycling pup," said Rocky, nodding his head. "Why would a rescue team need a recycling member?" muttered Detective Shaw to himself while shaking his head. "Anyway, the pup's still asleep. According to the nurses, he had a panic attack when he learned Stone was loose. Can't blame the kid, not after what he's been through." "Who is this guy? I mean, Ryder told us what happened, but what kind of person does something like that?" asked Rocky, still trying to wrap it all around his head. He knew there were bad people and pups in the world. His old owner had proven that when he tried to kill him in a drunken rage, but he never knew anyone who took such pleasure in killing. Somebody who is a goddamn psychopath, said Detective Shaw, who took out a pack of cigarettes before curing and putting them away. Crap, can't smoke in a hospital. Anyway, I've been on trying to nail Stone for about 4 years before we finally got him. Kid started as a killer when he was 12. Sliced his dad's throat for whatever reason. Joined a gang soon after and become a top member at the age of 15. By 18, that bastard killed all the leaders of the gang and made himself the new top dog. He's been behind multiple murders, disappearance, drugs, assaults, racketeering, and other crimes. Problem is we could never get the bastard until Zuma helped us out. How did he do that? Asked Rocky. Shaw ran his fingers through his hair. Well, it was like this. This. Detective Shaw had seen horrible murders before. He had seen a 17-year-old girl slice her father's head off because he was sleeping with her best friend. There was one time when a guy was found creeping in a graveyard and digging out corpses because he wanted to collect their skulls for his truck. And he once was at the scene of a school shooting at a high school when a bullied kid lost it, taking 2 students and a teacher with him before blowing himself up. Shaw had seen a lot of terrible things. But nothing was worse than seeing the handiwork of Damian Stone. Shaw and his department had been on the man for years, ever since he took over his old boss's gang. There wasn't a crime that he wasn't involved with that wasn't done in some horrible fashion, and there were enough bodies in his wake to fill a small graveyard. And now there were another 3 victims. Stepping into the blood-covered hut, Shaw looked at the 3 body bags being carried out while shaking his head at the sight. I fucking hate that bastard. We don't know if it was him, sir, said one of the CSIs who walked up to him. Did either of them have a stab in the throat with a little twist? Asked Shaw without looking at the silent CSI. When there was no answer, Shaw shook his head. I thought so. What's the story behind this? The witnesses who were here last afternoon remembered seeing a man we know is associated with Damian Stone. The CSI guy pointed to a crowd of horrified people behind the police tape. He tried to get them to pay for protection money. Needless to say, the owner, Greg, refused. Last night at about 10 a.m., there were shots heard from across the beach along with the sound of ATVs. Officers arrived 20 minutes earlier and found Greg, his wife Marcia, and dog Shelley all dead. Do we have any prints? Asked Shaw, but he already knew the answer to that. This is a well-known snack shack, sir, replied the CSI, shaking his head. There are literally hundreds of prints of all kinds. Even if Damian didn't wear gloves, it would take weeks to months to find his print. Anybody see or heard something? Asked Shaw, pinching the edge of his nose while eyeing the bullet holes. Shots were heard, but by the time they called the police the shooters were long gone. Nobody really saw anything either since the beach is closed at the time of all the killing. Do you have anything that can be of useful to me? Or shall we be putting these 3 names on the list of Damian Stone's bloody victim count, and notify the loved ones that we can't get justice for them either, shouted Shaw, getting everybody's attention. Furious, he slammed his fist against one of the tables so hard it cracked. God damn it all, people. For years we've been trying to build a case against this guy, and every time he does any of these horrible acts we don't have enough. Nobody is this good for this long. Now somebody give me some good news or else. Well, there is one thing, sir. You see we dash. Hey! You can't go through there, shouted an officer, catching everyone's attention. Shaw raised an eyebrow as a kid who had to be no older than 10 or 11 rushed into the crime scene with a pale face and worried expression. Are they okay? Please, tell me what I heard is not true. Kid, I don't know who you are, but I need you to leave the premise. This is a crime scene and Shaw was then silent when the boy pulled out a letter with the mayor's seal on it. Taking it, Detective Shaw read the whole thing with disbelief until he turned to the kid who was resisting the other officers from taking him out. Wait. Let the kid go. He's authorized to be here. What? Sir, you can't be serious. He's a kid, shouted one of the officers. That kid happens to have the mayor's approval on this letter to be involved in any emergency situations, including police cases, grumbled the detective as the officers let go. Though I don't know how the hell he has something like this. My team and I saved him and his family in a burning building a few months ago while was vacationing near my town, said Ryder, rubbing the back of his head before holding out his hand. I'm Ryder, head of Paw Patrol in Adventure Bay. That dog rescue team? Asked Detective Shaw, raising an eyebrow. Didn't your police pup catch the velvet-scarfed thief? Caught and arrested, sir, said Ryder with a smile. Chase loves to tell the tale whenever he can. For the first time since he got here, Detective Shaw cracked a smile before shaking the hand of Ryder. Well, I don't know how much help you can be, but the mayor pays my paycheck, so there we go. Ryder nodded before looking serious at the crime scene. He started turning a little green, but still held firm. This made Shaw raise his eyebrow. Most kids his age would have soiled themselves, yet Ryder was as cool as a professional. Wait, didn't they say there was something that happened to his kid? Yeah, something about his parents. Did they all die? Asked Ryder, whimpering as tears gathered in his eyes. Afraid so, whispered Shaw, shaking his head. A local gang lord by the name of Damian Stone is the main suspect. This is his kind of work. Does he do racketeering? There was a guy here yesterday who wanted Greg to pay for protection, but he refused. He threatened them and I guess they went through with it, whispered Ryder, a tear flowing down his face. You're taking this rather well, commented Detective Shaw. I've seen similar things before, when I was young, muttered Ryder, shaking his head. How did you know the owners? I ate here and met their dog, Zuma. I helped rescue his sister yesterday, and we became friends, whispered Ryder. Zuma? Who is Zuma? Asked Detective Shaw, raising an eyebrow. That's what I was going to tell you, sir, said the CSI as he shook his head. We have a surviving witness from the attack. The owner's other dog, Zuma. He's alive. Zuma's alive, shouted Ryder. We have a survivor, shouted Shaw, who grabbed the CSI. Why the balls didn't you tell me this sooner? I was going to, but Never mind that, where is this pup? He could be what we're looking for. He was taken to Coastal City General Hospital. When the medics arrived, he was screaming and traumatized by what he saw, so they had to sedate him and take him away. Sir, we need to get to Zuma. I need to see if he's okay, shouted Ryder. Come on, kid. We'll take my car. If this pup did see everything, then this might be the break my department's been waiting for, shouted Shaw as the two rushed out of the crime zone. The trip to the hospital didn't take long as Ryder and Detective Shaw rushed in and demanded the room number for Zuma. After getting it, they headed over and cleared their credentials with the officer on guard. A bandaged Zuma was staring at the blank wall with what some veterans called the 1,000-yard stare. Shaw felt his heart cringe at the idea that such a young pup had to see something so horrible at his age. Zuma? Asked Ryder as he carefully walked over to the chocolate Labrador. It's me, Ryder. Zuma slowly turned his head and faced his friend. Ryder? Yeah, it's me, Zuma, whispered Ryder, taking him into his embrace. It's me. The pup began to tear up as he dived into Ryder's chest and began to sob. They killed them all. Masha, Greg, Shelley. I couldn't help them, they died and Anne. It's not your fault, Zuma, whispered Ryder. Yes, it is, shouted Zuma, pushing himself of Ryder and looking at him with his sorrowful teary eyes. I could have done something. I should have done something. Or at least died with them. Kid, don't think like that, said Shaw, walking over and looking at the pup with sympathy. You were up against a maniac who would have killed you 6 ways to Sunday. There was nothing you could have done. Who are you? Asked Zuma, wiping his eyes. I'm Detective Shaw. I've been trying to nail Damien Stone for a long time now, he said, showing his badge. Listen, Zuma. This is important. Can you describe the person who led the attack on your family? Detective, maybe he needs to rest. He's been through a lot, said Ryder. I need all the information I can get while the memory is still fresh in his head. Anything he could remember can help us get Stone off the streets for good, said Shaw, shaking his head. He was blonde, with some green dye around his bangs. He had these golden teeth and earrings, but the worst was his eyes. Zuma shivered. His eyes were full of nothing but evil. Like he took a pleasure when he. Zuma held his stomach as he began to turn green. Sounds like him, whispered Shaw as he took out a notepad and paper. Zuma, can you tell me, as much as you can, what happened? I know it's going to be painful, but time is of the essence. Detective Shaw, warned Ryder. No, Ryder, whispered Zuma, touching his hand. The sadness in Zuma's eyes was now replaced with a new emotion, rage. I'll go thwuff it all, just promise me one thing. Zuma growled as he yelled as loud as he could, "Ost that son of a bitch."
Okay, guys, we're going to do like this. We are stopping now for here. I thought we are going to do. I was planning to do 3 chapters, but I decided not to do just 2 chapters for today. If you want to hear more chapters, like and subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to get notified when I post new updates on my YouTube channel. And yes, thanks for watching, and hopefully we see you next time again for more stories like this. And tomorrow we are doing the and tomorrow we are doing the what's it called again, Marshall and Chase on the case by Blazing Paw. Chapter 7-8 will be tomorrow. Be live at 6 p.m. 6 p.m. 6 p.m. Until then, guys, have a nice night, and hopefully I see you again soon again for tomorrow for the stream. Until then, guys, have a nice night.